There's been a lot of discussion following the win and rise of Zoran Mamdani in New York City. There are major concerns among the Jewish community about what the future of New York and also some places across the country will look like. There are three main cultural concerns regarding the rise of Mamdani in the Jewish community. The concern about his economic policy is typically not included in this. First, the issue is his anti-Semitic speech. Second, the issue is anti-Zionist speech, whether or not this is deemed as anti-Semitic. This, particularly in right-wing circles, is the rise of anti-West rhetoric, beyond just anti-Israel rhetoric. For the purposes of this video as a left perspective, particularly a Jewish left perspective, I am actually going to leave out this critique in this video. So, getting started, let's talk about the anti-Semitism concerns. This is planning to be a distinct commentary from his anti-Zionist speech. Many are concerned that all anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism, but I will discuss later how Mamdani does blur these lines. Concerns of anti-Semitism lie in his steadfast opposition to Israel. He created the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter at Bowdoin as a college student. He lists the influence of his parents, including BDS supporting filmmaker Mira Nair and his father, who is an anti-colonial historian at Columbia, as being central to his worldview. Certainly, particularly growing up in the Muslim faith, his upbringing would likely trend him toward having an anti-Israel bias. This is not to judge him, but to state where his roots lie. Now, there's nothing explicitly anti-Semitic about any of the above things about Mamdani's background. However, he has stated that his progressive politics have been based principally in his strong convictions towards Palestinian rights, rather than them being based on a pattern of universalism. Now, Mamdani has at times claimed recently that he is a universalist, believing in universal human rights, but part of me is more concerned that his prior quotes, especially that his rest of politics are based on Palestinian activism, that he is instead driven by deep-seated pro-Palestine ideology. That is not to say that being against Palestine is wrong, but I do think that he takes it to an extreme. This is an extreme where you have a hammer and everything looks like a nail. Take for instance, his recently uncovered quote where he said that the boots of the NYPD are being laced by the IDF. Also combine this with rallies he has led, such as the From Ferguson to Sheikh Jerry protest that attempts to connect the struggles of Black Americans to those of Palestinians. I think the issue of this type of rhetoric is that it blames domestic issues in America, which are rooted from the centuries-long history of slavery and racism, which led to slave-catching culture that eventually gave rise to modern-day policing. This emphasis on Israel, as the root of all problems, is anti-Semitic and should be condemned. Also, I do find the rhetoric racist as it attempts to bandwagon onto the mainstream Black Lives Matter and anti-police movement that was observed after George Floyd. Lastly, this speech negates the refugee and oppressed narrative that Jews had to overcome to create Israel, by now simplifying the Palestinian as oppressor compressed, because in the US Black Americans were pictured as the oppressed people. Other concerns I have with Mamdani's rhetoric is that he appears to support Palestinian exclusionism. That is the belief that Palestinians should rule over the full length of historic Palestine from the river to the sea, which calls for the ethnic cleansing and expulsion of Israelis. Now, he does claim to support the right of Israel to exist as a secular state, which does seem to support the possibility that he supports a one-state solution, which in my mind would not be de facto anti-Semitic, as this would not lead to mass expulsion of Israelis. However, I do not know how he may have this mindset in good faith. Does he think that all countries need to remove a religious character of their country? Does he think there needs to be regime changes in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Malaysia, Myanmar? And even if he does support changes in those countries, why is he not advocating for this publicly? And if we do have a one-state solution, how do you reconcile with the fact that Palestinians would overpopulate the Jews in a generation and likely want to kick them out? These are concerns in the Jewish committee that are valid and must be reconciled with. There is also concern that even though he said this on the debate stage, this may not represent his true convictions. And I previously posted on this channel, Mamdani appeared to support a call that the Palestine will be Arab from the river to the sea, which is a clear call for the explosion of Jews in the area. He said, "Give it up for these organizers." In response to this chant, he is also seen as coursing up to Linda Sassa and Nadine Kiswani, who are known Palestinian exclusionists. Time will tell where he surely thinks on this issue currently, but I am definitely concerned about the rhetoric from Mamdani in the last couple of years before he announced his candidacy for mayor. It is also concerning that he refused to condemn globalize the Intifada, showing that he is not yet ready to fully distance himself from the most extreme members of the pro-Palestinian movement that call for violence against Jews. The second concern which I will spend less time on is his overt anti-Zionism. He has stated without equivocal terms that he does not support the state of Israel as a Jewish state. This does go against the fundamental values of Zionism in the vast majority of Jewish institutions, and essentially all of organized religious Jewry in the world. His rise does represent a wave of a Zionism that has permeated throughout online spaces, democratic spaces, and even some young right-wing spaces. There are certainly concerns that anti-Zionism will be weaponized to run races throughout the country. Mamdani has blurred the line of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, as he has vehemently denounced anti-Semitism, but he likely defines this as old-school anti-Semitism, including white supremacist, Nazi, and violent acts against Jews. Anti-Semitism, unfortunately, has been more sinister in the last several decades. What will he do if a brick spray-painted Free Palestine is thrown into a Jewish restaurant? These concerns are also happening in the backdrop of the worst outbreak of anti-Semitism in America's history. So the question is, what is the solution to all these issues? First, Jewish institutions do need to pressure and keep Mamdani to account. There are going to be fervent pro-Palestinian activists who demand more from Mamdani and have already taken an issue with some of his rhetoric regarding Israel and protections he will ensure for the Jews of New York. Linda Sansa has already said that Mamdani has a debt to pay back for the support he has gotten from people like her. I do think, however, based upon the population of Jews in the entirety of New York City, as well as the support he has received from prominent Jews, such as Jerry Nadler and Brett Lander, that advocacy from mainstream Jewish institutions can have an impact in influencing many to do the right thing with respect to violent anti-Semitism and calming down the fuel of anti-Semitic vitriol that has seeped into anti-Semitism. Full stop. Well, I did previously state that anti-Zionism does not equal anti-Semitism. There has been clear examples that mainstream and prominent anti-Zionism has crossed into deep, vile anti-Semitism on the 7th of October, 2025. The 2-year anniversary for the Hamas massacre. There were those in New York City saying that the 7th of October was not enough. There were also people wearing Hamas headbands and calling for a chant that Bob Dylan made. It is too terrible to say in this video that I request you look that up to figure out what I'm saying here. So, in addition to giving appropriate pushback and pressure onto Mamdani, which is possible, we also need to make amicable partnerships where we can see each other and have deep conversations. In the manner in which Mamdani grew up, the odds were stacked against him that he would not become a strong anti-Zionist. That is not to say that he can never understand the importance of Zionism after having deep, heartfelt conversations with Jewish New Yorkers. I do think that bridge building is going to be important, particularly for a candidate who centered his campaign around an idea of humanism. There are calls in right-wing circles for panic, that he believes in jihad, that he is a communist, that everything he said in a slightly positive light regarding Israel or even Jews is a lie. I am planning to reject that call for warning. I am going to use my own eyes to judge what he's able to do for Jews across New York City when he takes office. There's a chance that he can be a champion for all people in New York City. We have to give him an honest chance to work with him. You'll have to pressure him. This isn't a call for complacency. This is a call for radical optimism. This is a call for a change in our daily routine, not necessarily being a cause for panic. This is also a call to hear from Mamdani, particularly when he shows us what he believes, and to demand him to confirm if this is what he really believes, and if he still does believe in dangerous ideologies like Palestinian exclusionism, seeing how real dialogue can influence a meaningful change in that mindset. Alan Dershowitz recently said that he wishes Mamdani fails, because if he succeeds that would only embolden him to actually implement true anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist policies, even comparing this to how the Nazis escalated anti-Semitic legislature. I think that if does not succeed, it is not going to be good for Jews. If Mamdani fails at safety, that is going to negatively impact Jews for 4 years. If he cannot control the dialogue on anti-Semitism, particularly at college campuses and on the streets, that is going to be a devastating. If we have a goal for him to fail, that is going to be counterproductive for us to see meaningful change, not just in our Jewish community, but also among common opinion writ large.